ex-boyfriend used me to pay off his debts, lied about wanting a future with me, and left me the day after I sold everything for our move, so I destroyed his new relationship and made sure his boss found out who he really was. I used to believe that love meant sacrifice, that if you really cared about someone, you'd do whatever it took to help them get through hard times. That's what I told myself every time I paid another one of his bills: rent, credit cards, his car, even his phone plan. We were supposed to move in together, start fresh in a new city. I sold my car. I left my job. I gave up the apartment I'd lived in for 4 years, all because he promised me this was the next step in our future. Then, the day after I handed over the deposit for our new place, he left me. No warning, no tears, just a single text. "I'm sorry, this isn't what I want anymore. I need space. Please don't contact me." I found out 3 days later he was already with someone else. A girl from his office. She posted a photo of them kissing with the caption, "Sometimes love finds you when you least expect it." I was devastated, but not broken, because what he didn't know was that while he was using me, I was saving everything. The screenshots, the money transfers, the texts where he begged me to pay off his gambling debt and promised to pay me back. And now that he had something to lose, his new girl, his corporate job, his clean reputation, I made sure everyone around him found out exactly what kind of man he really was. And I didn't even have to lie, just hit send. I used to believe that love was built on sacrifice, that if someone you cared about was struggling, you stood by them, no matter how heavy the load, no matter how much it cost you. And for the longest time, that's how I justified the slow erosion of everything I had, every boundary I lowered, every dream I postponed in order to lift him out of his self-made hole. His name was Darren, and when we met, he was charming, intelligent, a little broken, but hopeful. And I convinced myself that with enough patience, enough love, I could be the one to help him get back on his feet. At first, it was small things: splitting dinner bills when he forgot his wallet, helping him cover rent when he missed a paycheck, paying for gas because he didn't want to run his card again. But as weeks turned to months, the requests became larger, more urgent. His credit card had hit the limit. Could I cover it just this once? His car needed new brakes. Could I loan him the money until payday? He was falling behind on student loans, behind on everything, and every time I hesitated, he reminded me of our future, of how this was just a rough patch before we moved in together, started fresh, built a life worth everything we'd been through. And I believed him. I sold my car to contribute to our moving fund. I broke the lease on the apartment I'd had for 4 years, the one that still held memories of my independence and safety. I left a job I'd worked hard to grow in, believing that the marketing position he swore was waiting for me in the new city would be even better. I handed over the deposit for our new place, my money in full, because he said he was still waiting for a bank transfer to clear. I didn't question it. I wanted to trust him. I wanted to believe in what we were building. And then, the next morning, as I was folding the last of our boxes and making a list of what we still needed to pick up before the move, I got a text message. Just a text. No phone call, no face-to-face. "I'm sorry, this isn't what I want anymore. I need space. Please don't contact me." I stared at the screen for a long time, thinking it was a mistake, a cruel prank, something he'd sent by accident. I tried calling, straight to voicemail. I tried texting. No response. Within minutes, I was blocked on everything. His number, Instagram, Facebook, even our shared Spotify account. I sat on the floor of my now empty apartment, the one I had given up for a man who couldn't even say goodbye to my face. And for the first time in years, I felt the kind of silence that isn't just quiet, it's hollow. 3 days later, a friend sent me a screenshot. A girl I vaguely remembered from Darren's office, someone he said was just a coworker, had posted a photo of the two of them kissing at a rooftop bar, captioned, "Sometimes love finds you when you least expect it." My hands went numb. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I had sold everything for him. I had bled for him. And now he was in someone else's arms, smiling like he hadn't just set fire to my life and walked away without looking back. But the thing about pain, the kind of pain that rips you open and leaves you bare, is that it doesn't stay as pain forever. Eventually, it curdles into clarity. And as I stared at that photo, something in me shifted. I remembered every emergency that turned out to be poor planning, every late-night panic that I fixed, every lie I excused because I loved him. And I remembered something else too. While he was using me, manipulating me, squeezing every bit of generosity out of me, I had been saving everything. Every payment, every bank transfer, every desperate message where he promised to pay me back. Every screenshot of him thanking me for saving him, every lie, I had it all. And now that he was trying to rewrite the narrative, casting me as a clingy ex who couldn't handle the breakup, I realized something very simple. I didn't have to make anything up. I didn't have to scheme. I didn't have to embellish. All I had to do was show people who he really was. And now that he had something to lose, his new relationship, his job, his reputation, I was ready to do exactly that. I wasn't broken, I wasn't bitter, I was focused, and I was just getting started. The first time I opened the folder was just to remind myself that I hadn't imagined it all, that I hadn't hallucinated the late-night calls where he cried about his gambling debts, the long emails where he promised that once we moved, he'd pay me back in full, with interest, or the morning he kissed my forehead after I transferred $200 to cover his car loan and said, "I don't deserve you." But the more I clicked through the screenshots, the more something changed in me, a numbness that began to thaw and turn into precision, because now I saw them not as memories, but as evidence, not as regrets, but as receipts. There were 87 screenshots in total. Text messages where he thanked me for saving him, banking app confirmations, emails with attachments titled "payment plan draft" that never materialized, and even an audio clip he left me once after a drunken night out where he said, "If this doesn't work out, it's on me. You did everything right." I started organizing them by category: financial transactions, relationship promises, lies, and manipulation. I created a spreadsheet with dates, amounts, reasons given, and the method of payment: Venmo, Zelle, PayPal, bank transfers. It totaled $14,732. I included the $2,500 I'd spent on the moving deposit and the value of my car, which I sold for well below market price to help fund our fresh start. At first, I didn't know what I was going to do with all of it. I wasn't planning to take him to court or demand the money back. I just wanted it to mean something. I wanted to hold in my hands a digital ledger of everything I'd endured, everything I'd given, everything he had taken while telling me I was the one. I hadn't spoken to anyone about what had happened, not even my sister, who always had a sixth sense for men like Darren. I wasn't ready to hear, "I told you so." I wasn't ready to break down. What I was ready for was control. 3 days after I organized the evidence, I began to look into his new life. Her name was Marissa. According to her LinkedIn, she was a junior executive at the same company as Darren, marketing department, recently promoted, and coincidentally, the daughter of Harold Klein, vice president of corporate communications at the firm. That explained the rooftop photo, the champagne, the sudden leap in lifestyle. Darren had moved on to someone with real connections, someone with pedigree, someone who could elevate him socially and professionally. But he had also walked into a very visible world now, a corporate ecosystem that thrived on appearances, vetting, and reputation, and I knew how fragile that ecosystem really was. The company website listed Darren as a client relations specialist, fancy term for someone who smoothed over contract hiccups and presented a polished face to clients. I knew enough about his work to know that trust was everything in that role, and if anyone were to question his ethics, his financial reliability, or his interpersonal behavior, he'd be done. That's when I opened a blank email draft. No sender name, no signature, just the company's general HR email address in the recipient line. I began writing, "Hello, I am writing to bring to your attention information regarding a current employee, Darren White, whose recent conduct may raise concerns for your organization, especially considering his client-facing responsibilities." I attached a PDF containing the compiled evidence, redacted only where absolutely necessary to protect myself. In the body, I explained that I was a former partner who had supported him financially for nearly 2 years under the promise of a shared future, only to be discarded the day after I funded our relocation and after he had entered a new relationship with someone at the company. I wasn't melodramatic. I was clinical. I outlined the facts, the totals, the manipulations, the timeline, and I hit send. I didn't expect an immediate response. These things take time. But that wasn't the only move I made. I created a new Instagram account, blank profile, no followers, and followed Marissa. I didn't message her, not directly. Instead, I began interacting with her posts the way any stranger might. A like here, a comment there. "Gorgeous view," on a photo of her and Darren having brunch. "You two look so happy," on another photo at an event. She liked the comments, replied with emojis. She was unsuspecting. Then, one night, I DM'd her. No aggression. Just a question. "Hi, Marissa. I know this is random, and I promise I'm not trying to start drama, but do you mind if I ask how long you and Darren have been together? I think we might have overlapped, and I just want to confirm some things for my own closure." She left it on read for 4 hours, then replied, "We've been dating for a few weeks. Why?" I sent a single screenshot, one of him saying, "I can't wait to build a future with you. Dated 4 days before he dumped me." She didn't reply. But 20 minutes later, she blocked me. I expected that. What I didn't expect was the email I received from a different address 2 days later. "Hi, I'm a member of the internal compliance team at company name. We'd like to ask a few follow-up questions about the information you submitted if you're available." And just like that, the door opened. Darren didn't know it yet, but the world he'd crawled into, so carefully curated, so status-obsessed, was about to start questioning the very thing he thought he'd perfected: his image. And I wasn't going to stop until every part of it came undone. The first sign that Darren was beginning to feel the pressure came not from a public meltdown or an angry phone call, but from a single out-of-nowhere message sent at 2:14 a.m. on a Thursday night. "Did you do something?" No greeting. No punctuation beyond the question mark. No attempt to explain himself or ask how I was doing after what he'd done to me. Just those 4 words, like a child caught stealing who isn't quite sure how much trouble he's in yet. And it was almost funny how predictable it was. The moment the foundation he built on lies began to tremble, he crawled right back to the woman he had discarded, hoping to manipulate her one last time. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. My silence would be louder than any denial he could offer. But I knew the cracks were starting to show, and I wanted to be there when they widened. A friend of mine, someone who still worked in the same industry, messaged me the next day saying she'd heard rumors swirling about Darren's past, that someone had submitted a report to HR about financial manipulation involving a former partner, and that his name had been flagged internally. She didn't know it was me who started it, of course. I kept that secret to myself. But her message confirmed what I had suspected. The walls were closing in, and Darren had no idea which way to turn. Meanwhile, I continued to drip-feed small, calculated truths into his new life. Using my burner account, I made sure to like certain comments on Marissa's profile, the ones where people asked how they met, when they started dating, if she was finally over her ex. I liked a post she made about trust being the foundation of everything, and another one where she posted a motivational quote that said, "Don't let anyone play you." Every interaction was strategic, measured, just enough to stir discomfort without being overt. And then I dropped the next piece. I emailed Marissa from a separate anonymous address. No threats, no drama, just a folder link titled, "Before you go any further." Inside, I included the full set of evidence: messages, money transfers, a timeline of our relationship, and the overlap with hers. At the top of the folder was a short note. "This isn't about revenge, it's about the truth. I think you deserve to know who you're really with." She didn't reply, but she didn't block me again either. And 2 days later, she deleted every single photo of Darren from her Instagram. I checked his account, and all of her photos were still there. He was still pretending nothing had changed, probably thinking he could fix it with a dozen roses and a promise to explain. That was when I knew she had started to pull away. But I wasn't finished. Because what Darren hadn't considered was that his new girlfriend wasn't just a rebound. She was the daughter of a man who ran the department Darren was trying to climb through, a man whose name was on nearly every major press release and company initiative, a man who had built his entire brand on integrity, reputation, and trust. So I scheduled a meeting, not through back channels or deception, just a professional message sent to his office assistant. "Hi, I'd like to request a brief in-person meeting with Mr. Klein regarding an urgent matter involving an employee at your firm. I have documentation I believe he'll want to see." It took 36 hours for them to respond, and when they did, it was a simple, "Mr. Klein is available for 15 minutes on Friday at 10:30 a.m. I dressed simply, no dramatics, just a clean blazer and the calm demeanor of a woman who had nothing left to lose, and everything prepared. When I walked into the conference room, Mr. Klein was already seated, flanked by an assistant who looked like she had read every email twice. I introduced myself, slid the folder across the table, and said, "This isn't about destroying someone's life. It's about accountability. I think you should know the kind of man representing your company, and your daughter." He didn't say much, just opened the folder and began flipping through, expression hardening with every page. The assistant took notes. I stayed silent. When he finished, he asked just one question. "Do you have a copy of the original bank transfers?" I pulled out a USB drive. All time-stamped and backed up. He nodded once. "Thank you. We'll take it from here." That was all. No emotion, no promises, just professionalism. But I could see it in his eyes, the shift from polite corporate distance to something colder, protective, dangerous. Darren had crossed a line, and now it wasn't just me he had to answer to. It was the father of the woman he had tried to manipulate, the employer whose trust he had weaponized for his own gain. I walked out of that office with my shoulders back and my heart pounding, not with fear, but with purpose. The first crack had become a fracture, and soon the entire mask Darren wore was going to shatter. I didn't have to raise my voice, I just had to be patient, because now he wasn't just running from me, he was running out of time. It started slowly, like a small shift in the air before a storm, but I knew the signs well enough by now. Subtle changes in posture, clipped language, people stepping back just enough to make it clear something had shifted. And by the following week, Darren's carefully manicured image began to fall apart piece by piece, starting with whispers in his office that escalated into side-eyes during meetings, and finally full-blown HR inquiries he couldn't dodge. A friend of mine who worked in the same building said she saw him being pulled into a conference room by 2 people from compliance, their expressions unreadable, while Darren looked pale and stiff, clutching his phone like it held a lifeline no one would offer anymore. Around the same time, Marissa stopped showing up to work events. She deleted her Instagram entirely, shut down her LinkedIn, and word spread that she'd taken a personal leave. No one said why, but everyone guessed. Someone leaked that the folder I had given her had been forwarded internally. Not officially, of course. It had accidentally been opened on a shared screen during a team call, just long enough for the first few lines to be visible before Darren scrambled to close the window. But it was too late. Screenshots were taken. Context didn't matter. His panic said it all. People started to talk. The phrase, credibility concerns, popped up in private channels. One of his clients asked to be reassigned. Another asked flat out if the rumors were true. Darren tried to spin it. Told people I was a bitter ex, that I was unstable, jealous, obsessed. But it didn't work. Not anymore. Because this time, the proof wasn't coming from me. It was spreading through the very networks he had built his success on. One of his former coworkers sent me an anonymous DM. "You did the right thing. He tried something similar with me when I was new. Never thought someone would finally expose him." Another message came from a recruiter who thanked me, said they'd blacklisted him quietly from their client list. But the most satisfying moment came when my friend, still inside the company, texted me a single sentence. "He was escorted out today. No fanfare, no speech, just a cardboard box and a silent walk past a hallway full of people who no longer looked up to him, no longer believed in his glossy smile or rehearsed humility." Later that day, I received a second message. "Harold Klein is stepping down temporarily to support his daughter through a private matter." I knew what that meant. Darren hadn't just lost a job. He'd fractured a family's reputation, embarrassed a powerful man, and humiliated the woman he claimed to love. And still, I hadn't spoken to him. Not once. I hadn't replied to his desperate 2 a.m. messages. I hadn't answered the calls that started coming from private numbers. I hadn't posted a single thing publicly. I didn't need to. I had become a shadow he couldn't outrun, a consequence he never expected to face. And yet, even after all that, there was one final thread left to pull. One final move. Something I hadn't told anyone yet. Because while the job was gone, and Marissa was gone, and his social circle had thinned to nothing but ghosts and burnouts, Darren was still trying to rebuild. He had quietly launched a freelance consulting site under a new alias. Same style, same voice, same fraudulent credentials. It took me less than an hour to trace the domain back to him. Less than 2 minutes to find the new contact email. I didn't rage. I didn't warn. I submitted a formal report to the freelance platform he was using, attaching the same folder I'd handed to Harold, updated with the consulting site screenshots and metadata. Within 48 hours, the page was removed. The account was suspended. He tried to start again, and I shut it down. Not because I needed revenge, but because I needed to protect the next person, the next woman, the next client, the next naive version of myself who might believe his voice, his charm, his polished promises. And now, with the walls finally closing in on every side, I knew he had nothing left to run toward. The house of cards had collapsed. The man who once stood in my apartment holding my dreams in one hand and my bank account in the other had finally been revealed for what he really was. And the best part? I had never once lied. I had simply shown the truth, piece by piece, until the world did the rest. And there was only one more step to take. One final door to close. One final silence to deliver. I always thought that when this moment came, when the lies finally unraveled and Darren faced the consequences of everything he'd done to me and to others, I would feel a burst of adrenaline, some cinematic surge of triumph, but what I felt instead was something far quieter and heavier, like the weight of a truth too long held finally sliding off my chest and letting me stand straight again. And when I received the message confirming that his freelance accounts had been permanently shut down, due to verified misrepresentation of professional history, I didn't smile or cheer. I just exhaled and sat with the silence, finally understanding what real closure feels like. He didn't try to hide after that. He couldn't. Word spread fast in our industry, and even faster among the online communities he once used to show off his curated image of success, humility, and charm. One of his old posts on LinkedIn, an inspirational quote about building trust brick by brick, was flooded with sarcastic comments and quiet jabs from former connections who now saw through him. Eventually, he deleted it, then his entire profile. But nothing really disappears on the internet, especially when enough people are motivated to remember. The girl who once believed she had a future with him, the woman I had warned, didn't reach out to me again. She didn't have to. Her silence was loud enough. Mutual contacts confirmed that she'd moved out of the apartment they had rushed into weeks after he dumped me, that she was living with a friend temporarily, and that her father had severed ties with Darren entirely. He wasn't just unemployed, he was radioactive. His name had become a cautionary tale, and I was no longer the woman crying in the wreckage. I was the one holding the match, but I never had to strike it. All I had to do was place it gently next to the truth and let his own actions light the flame. He sent me one last message from a burner account I didn't recognize until I opened it and saw his usual tone beneath the false name. "You ruined everything," it said. "I loved you. Why would you do this to me?" It would have been laughable if it weren't so desperate. Because he never loved me. Not really. He loved what I gave him. My money, my patience, my silence. And when I stopped giving, when I started keeping records instead of swallowing pain, that's when his world began to crumble. I didn't respond. I archived the message, filed it into the same folder as all the others, and moved on. My own life had started to take root again. I found a new job. Not a dream job, but one where my work was seen and respected. I moved into a studio that was small but mine. I bought a used car and started rebuilding the life I had traded for his promises. And the strange part was, I didn't feel bitter. I didn't feel jaded. I felt clean, like a wound had finally closed. I ran into someone months later at a networking event, a guy who had known Darren once, who had even followed him on social media. He asked, "Hey, whatever happened to that guy? The one you were going to move in with?" And I just smiled and said, he had a lot of growing up to do. I didn't need to say more. People already knew. His name was no longer synonymous with success or drive or charisma. It was associated with manipulation, deceit, and shame. And every time someone whispered it, every time another recruiter said, "Not him," I knew the truth had done its job. It hadn't just taken him down, it had protected others. And maybe, just maybe, that was the real victory. Not revenge, not vengeance, but protection. And now, with nothing left to expose, nothing left to send, I was ready to close the folder, to end the chapter. But not before one final thing. One final gift to myself. I printed the text he had sent me the day he left, the one that started it all. "I'm sorry, this isn't what I want anymore. I need space. Please don't contact me." I framed it, placed it in a drawer at the back of my desk, and every time I look at it, I remember. Sometimes the people who leave you think they're walking away with everything. They don't realize you were the one holding the receipts. It's strange how silence, once something that used to terrify me, the kind that followed his disappearing acts, his missed calls, his cold apologies, has become my greatest ally, my final act of resistance, and the clearest reflection of my healing. Because in the aftermath of everything, when the noise of his downfall settled and the gossip faded and the chaos he caused finally dissolved into stillness, I didn't feel hollow or victorious or vengeful. I felt anchored, like I had finally stepped back into the body I'd abandoned during those 2 years of constant compromise, sacrifice, and false hope. There was no dramatic final confrontation, no teary apology, no apology at all really, just the absence of him. And in that absence I found clarity, a kind of quiet that filled the space he once occupied in my mind, where doubt and guilt used to live. He never tried to call again, not after that last burner message. He knew somehow that I wouldn't respond, that I didn't need to, that the version of me he once controlled, through promises, debt, and affection laced with manipulation, no longer existed, and I didn't look for updates on his life, didn't stalk him through mutuals, didn't ask around. I didn't have to. Because every time someone said, "You look different," or "There's something stronger about you now," I knew it wasn't because I'd won some battle with him. It was because I'd stopped losing battles with myself. I started waking up without dread, eating without stress, making decisions without imagining how he'd react. I repainted my space in colors he hated. I bought art he used to mock. I wore lipstick shades he once called too loud and danced in my kitchen to playlists he'd sneered at. And slowly, the version of me I'd buried under his comfort and chaos began to reemerge. Smarter, colder in some ways, but clearer, sharper, untouchable. I never told my family the full story. Not because I was ashamed, but because they didn't need to carry it. That pain, that lesson, was mine. And I honored it quietly. I saved up again. Took a weekend trip alone just because. I started building my savings from scratch, dollar by dollar, not to give to someone else this time, but to invest in myself. For the business idea I had paused for him, for the classes I never enrolled in because I was too busy fixing his messes, for the life he always said was unrealistic unless we built it together. And then one afternoon, months later, I received a job offer, one that paid more than any role I'd ever held, one that valued the exact experience I used to hide, because Darren said it wasn't impressive enough. I accepted it with a calm heart. Not because it proved him wrong, but because I no longer needed to be right. I'd stopped defining my value in contrast to his failures. I was done measuring my healing by his suffering. I had already done enough. And in the space where anger used to burn, I planted other things, patience, humor, even forgiveness, not for him, but for myself, for the girl who trusted too deeply, who gave too freely, who believed that love meant losing parts of yourself for the comfort of someone else. I don't hate her. She was brave, she was kind, she was trying, and now she is me, whole, but wiser. The silence between us remains unbroken, and I intend to keep it that way. Because nothing I could ever say to him would speak louder than the life I rebuilt without him. I don't need revenge anymore. I don't need him to know how far I've come. I don't care if he ever sees it. The only validation I need is the quiet peace I feel at night when I close my eyes, Knowing I have nothing left to prove, I told the truth. I let it speak. And when the dust settled, I stood alone in the wreckage, and I thrived. And that, I realized, was the most poetic ending of all. Not the scream, not the slap, but the silence.